They mocked it before the first bale was stacked. That was how new ideas usually arrived in the valley. Not examined, not tested, but laughed at from a safe distance. Especially when the idea involved covering a steel building in hay. Elias Mercer heard the laughter all morning. He was halfway up a wooden ladder, boots braced against the curved side of his old Quonset hut, dragging a rope-tied bale upward while 3 men stood by the road pretending they had business nearby. "You building a barn on top of a house?" one called. "No." Another answered before Elias could. "He's feeding the place." The third laughed hardest, because from the outside, it did look ridiculous. The Quonset hut already stood like an oversized barrel laid on its side. Curved steel walls, rounded roof, no porch, no beauty, no resemblance to the timber homes everyone respected. Now Elias was lashing rectangular hay bales across the metal shell from ground to roofline, row after row, until the hut began to resemble a giant loaf of straw abandoned in the snow. No one in town understood why a man would bury steel in hay. Most assumed desperation. Some assumed stupidity. Only Elias knew it was neither. He had spent 2 winters inside the hut already. That was enough to teach him what steel did in cold weather. It surrendered. The moment the outside air dropped, the metal skin became cold as ice. Any heat from the stove inside rushed straight toward those walls and vanished into the night. By midnight, the stove had to be fed again. By dawn, the floor felt like stone and the walls sweated frost. The hut was strong. It was dry. It was nearly impossible to keep warm. Most men would have sold it. Elias decided to fix it. He had once worked harvest crews farther north, where root cellars were banked in straw and barrels of apples were wrapped in chaff to survive deep freezes. Farmers insulated what mattered using what they had. And what the valley had plenty of that year was hay. Not perfect hay. Not market hay. The late rains had spoiled much of it for horses. Mold in some stacks, damp edges in others, coarse stems not worth feeding. But worthless for feed did not mean worthless for warmth. So Elias bought damaged bales cheap and hauled them home. First he built a simple timber frame around the hut. Uprights set a few feet from the steel shell with cross braces following the curve. Then he stacked bales between frame and steel, leaving a narrow air gap where he wanted one and packing tighter where wind hit hardest. North side thickest. Roof doubled. Entrance protected by a short, bale-lined tunnel. By the second day, the jokes spread through town. He's hiding from his own house. Wait till one spark turns it into a bonfire. Maybe he thinks winter eats straw instead of men. Elias answered none of it. He kept stacking, because he understood something they did not. Cold does not need to break a wall. It only needs a path. Steel gave it one. Hay could take it away. Each bale trapped countless pockets of still air. Air that could not move easily, could not carry heat away quickly. Layer enough of it outside the steel, block the wind from touching the metal directly, and the hut changed from exposed shell to protected core. That was the theory. Winter would judge the rest. By first frost, the Quonset looked transformed. Only the front doorway and chimney remained visible. Everything else sat beneath a thick, golden-brown coat of hay dusted with early snow. Children came to stare. Adults came to smirk. Some came simply because they could not believe he had gone that far. Mrs. Tolland from the bakery stood at the lane one morning and asked the question others hid behind laughter. "Elias, does it actually work?" He glanced at the hut, then back at her. "Come ask me in January." The first cold nights arrived gently. Thin ice on buckets. Breath indoors before sunrise. Smoke lifting clean and straight into pale skies. Inside the hay-wrapped hut, Elias lit the stove low and waited. The room warmed faster than before. That surprised him less than what followed. It stayed warm after the flames settled. The steel walls no longer felt like winter itself. They felt neutral. The air near the curved ceiling no longer raced away into cold metal. Drafts along the floor faded. He used one log where he once used two, then less. By late evening he sat in shirt sleeves reading beside a modest fire while outside frost silvered the hay. Still, mild weather proves little. Then the wind came. 3 days from the North Pass, without pause. Snow moved sideways across the fields. Cabin shutters banged loose. Door seams whistled. Men cursed while carrying wood because their fires burned harder and homes felt colder anyway. The wind struck Elias's hut and found straw first. Not steel. It slowed in the bale layers, lost force in gaps and fibers, then reached the metal skin weakened. Inside, The difference was startling. No sudden chill at the walls. No roaring stove required. Only steady warmth. That evening, Caleb Turner arrived with frozen eyebrows and pride he was trying not to swallow. "Need to borrow your ladder," he said. Elias opened the bale-lined entrance flap. "You need to warm up first." Caleb stepped through the short tunnel and into the hut, then stopped. The stove burned low, yet the room was comfortable from door to back wall. No icy floor. No cold wall sweat. No need to crowd the fire. Caleb slowly turned in place. "It's warmer in here than my father's kitchen." Elias shrugged. "Kitchen's fighting the wind." Caleb touched the inner steel wall, expecting cold. Instead, he found only coolness. "What did you do?" "Kept winter off the metal." Caleb stared a moment longer, then laughed once, not mocking now. "You're going to make people angry." "Why?" "Because this is simple." Word traveled faster than smoke in small towns. By the next week, people were watching Elias's chimney. It smoked lightly while theirs roared. They noticed he chopped less wood. They noticed he slept later because he no longer woke twice each night to feed the stove. And then the season's first blizzard rolled over the valley. Snow buried fences by dusk. Wind drove through every crack in town. Families gathered in single rooms and burned fuel like fear itself. Inside the hay-covered Quonset hut, Elias added one log and listened to the storm dull itself in the walls. Near midnight, pounding sounded from the outer tunnel. He opened the door to find Mrs. Tolland clutching a wrapped loaf under one arm and shivering under two blankets. "Our back room froze," she said through chattering teeth. "I brought bread." Elias stepped aside. Behind her, through the snow-dark lane, more lanterns were moving toward the hay-covered hut. By the time Elias barred the door behind Mrs. Tolland, 3 more lanterns had reached the lane. Shapes moved through blowing snow, heads bent low against the wind. The blizzard had done what mockery never could. It made people practical. Caleb Turner came first, carrying an armload of split wood and leading his younger brother by the shoulder. "Payment before asking favors," Caleb said, stamping snow from his boots. "Then come in richer than you arrived," Elias replied. Next came Harlan Pike and his wife, their chimney draft blocked by drifting snow. Then old Mr. Wexler, whose kitchen fire burned hot but could not warm the floors. Then 2 children from the Miller place wrapped in quilts and wide-eyed from cold. The Quonset filled quickly, yet it did not feel crowded. That surprised everyone. The rounded space used room differently than square homes. Benches followed the curved walls. Shelves rose overhead. The center stayed clear. Warmth moved evenly without corners trapping cold. People sat where they could and slowly began removing gloves. Then hats. Then the look of strain they had carried through the storm. Because the room felt wrong in the best possible way. The stove was not raging. No huge blaze. No frantic feeding of wood. Yet the air remained steady and warm from front tunnel to back wall. Mrs. Tolland held both palms near the iron stove, then glanced suspiciously at it. "That little thing can't be doing all this." "It isn't," Elias said. He tapped the wall beside him. "The hay is." Several heads turned. Harlan snorted softly. "Straw can't make heat." "No," Elias replied. "It keeps me from losing it." That quieted the room. Outside, wind screamed over the valley. Inside, people listened. Elias explained only what mattered. The hay trapped still air. Still air slowed heat loss. The wind struck the bales first instead of the steel. The steel no longer touched winter directly. So the stove heated the room instead of heating the outdoors. No one argued. Because no one could. They were sitting inside the proof. The storm lasted until morning. When the wind finally weakened, men stepped outside to dig doors clear and check neighbors. Several returned before noon simply to warm again. Word spread across town before the drifts were even shoveled. The hay-covered hut had sheltered 6 families with one modest stove. That ended the laughter completely. Winter deepened after that. The blizzard had only announced the season. What followed were the long, hard weeks that tested every home honestly. Clear nights below zero, bitter wind from the pass. Snow crusted so hard boots rang on it. Cabins began shrinking in use. Families closed back rooms. People slept in kitchens. Woodpiles dropped faster than anyone admitted. Each evening, smoke from most chimneys rose thick and urgent. From Elias's chimney, it rose thin and steady. People noticed. They noticed he cut wood every 3rd day while others chopped daily. They noticed he looked rested while fathers in town wore the hollow eyes of broken sleep. They noticed frost on their inside walls while none formed on his steel shell. Soon visits became requests. Not for charity, for instruction. Caleb came with a notebook and questions. How thick on the north side? Thicker than the south. What about sparks? Keep bales clear of chimney pipe. Use shielding. Use scents. Mrs. Tolland wanted to know if flour sacks stuffed with straw could line her bakery wall. They can, Elias said, if kept dry. Harlan Pike asked nothing at first. He only stared at the hut from outside. 3 days later he arrived hauling spoiled hay on a sled. Need to borrow your ladder, he muttered. Elias smiled slightly. It's warmer than before. Soon the town changed sound. Instead of only axes and saws, there came rope pulls, wagon creaks, laughter of a different kind, and the thud of bales being stacked against walls. Not everyone copied the whole Quonset design. Most adapted what they had. Hay berms against north walls. Straw-packed porches turned into entry tunnels. Temporary windbreaks around exposed cabins. Double layers around sheds converted into winter rooms. Simple ideas. Visible results. Then came the deep freeze. The kind old men tied to memory like war stories. Water froze indoors. Lantern oil thickened. 2 chimneys cracked from overfiring. Yet this time, the town was not helpless. Homes with added insulation held heat longer. Stoves burned lower. What lasted? Children slept through the night. And when someone's fire failed, they no longer trudged only to Elias's place. Neighbors now had warm rooms of their own. One evening during the worst of it, the mayor himself came to the Quonset hut. A proud man who had once laughed loud enough for 3 others. He stood inside the doorway tunnel, brushing snow from his coat. I owe you an apology, he said. Elias was splitting kindling. For what? For calling this ridiculous. Elias looked around the warm, curved room, then toward the town, where smoke rose calmly in the moonlight. It was ridiculous, he said. The mayor blinked. Elias shrugged. Until it worked. The man laughed then, honest and humbled. Spring arrived late, but certain. Snow sank into slush. Roads reappeared. Hay bales darkened and were stripped away where no longer needed. Yet the lesson stayed. People rebuilt differently that summer. Walls designed for winter wind, not just summer appearance. Storage of insulating materials became as important as storing fuel. Some even purchased old steel sheds and tanks to convert the way Elias had. At the autumn fair, a visitor from another county stared at the Quonset and asked why so many houses nearby had straw berms and enclosed porches. Caleb answered before Elias could. Because one fool was cold first. The next winter came hard again, but it met a town prepared. Wood piles lasted longer. Smoke rose lighter. No family fled a freezing back room in the night. And at the far edge of the valley, the hay-covered Quonset hut still stood, half buried in golden bales once more, chimney breathing steadily into the frost. Travelers pointed and smiled. Locals corrected them with pride. That strange place, they'd say. That's where we learn how to stay warm.